Hello, here we are. We're live. Just checking in to see who's there. Hello. Hi there. Well, it's 2:00, so I think it's time that we kick off. Good afternoon. Welcome. Glad you have tuned in. My name is Alex McPhail, and I thought I'd try something new. Hi there. I'm getting my first hello moment, please. Big shout out to my good friend Fran. I don't know if clapping back is the response, but there we go. Welcome, Fran. Good to see you here. So here we go. It's time to upskill ourselves in this new world order that we're facing right now. And I thought, while we wait for more to tune in, I'd start with one of my favorite authors. If you haven't come across Richard Bach yet, it's time you did. You can get books online or delivered to you, whichever you choose. Hard copy books are great. So let me start with a short story and we take it from there. This one is the Richard Bach Gift of Wings. He's most famous for books like Jonathan Livingston Seagull and Illusions, both wonderful books. I've gifted them many times. This is a book of short stories called A Gift of Wings, and the story I'm reading today is A Light in a Toolbox. It begins, that which a man believes, the philosophers say, is that which becomes his reality. So it was for years, as I said over and again, I'm no mechanic. I was no mechanic, as I said. I closed a whole world of light from myself. There had to be somebody else to work on my planes, or I couldn't fly. Then I came to own a crazy old biplane with an old-fashioned round engine on its nose. And it didn't take long to discover that this machine was not about to tolerate a pilot who didn't know something of the personality in a 175 horsepower Wright whirlwind. Something about the repair of wooden ribs and doped fabric. That was how the rarest event in life came to me. I changed the way I thought. I learned the mechanics of airplanes. What everybody else had known for so long was brand new adventure to me. An engine, for instance, torn apart and scattered across a workbench, is just a collection of odd-shaped pieces. It is cold, dead iron. Yet those same pieces, assembled and bolted into a cold, dead airframe, become a new being, a finished sculpture, an art form worthy of any gallery on earth. And like no other sculpture in the history of art, the dead engine and dead airframe came to life at the touch of a pilot's hand and joined their life with his own. Standing separately, the iron and the wood and the cloth and the man are chained to the ground. Together, they can lift up into the sky, exploring places where none of them has ever been before. This was surprising for me to learn because I had always thought that mechanics was broken metal and muttered curses. It was all there in the hangar to see the moment I opened my eyes, like an exhibit in a museum when the light is turned on. I saw on the bench the elegance of a half-inch socket set, the smooth, simple grace of an end-wrench wiped clean of oil, like a new art student who in one day first sees the work of Vincent van Gogh and Auguste Rodin and Alexander Calder. So I suddenly noticed the work of Snap-on and Craftsman and Crescent Tool Company, gleaming, silent, and waiting in battered toolbox trays. Art of tools led to art of engines, and in time I came to understand the whirlwind, to think of it as a living friend with whims and fancies, instead of mystic, sinister unknown. What a discovery that was to find what was going on inside that grey steel case, behind the spinning flash of the propeller blade and the flickering bursts of engine roar. No longer was it dark inside those cylinders around the crankshaft. There was light, I knew. There was intake and compression and power and exhaust. There were pressure oil bearings to hold fresh fire. There was the frail impeller of the supercharger, humming 7 times round for every turn of the propeller. Excuse me. Rods and pistons, cam rings, and learned about weld clusters and bulkheads, stringers and rib stitching, pulleys and fair leads, wash-in, offsets, rigging. I'd been flying for years, and yet this was the first day I ever saw an airplane, studied it and noticed it. All these little parts fitting together to make a complete aircraft. It was great. I raged in the need to own a field full of airplanes because they were so pretty. I needed them so that I could walk around and look at this human being in control of himself and his airplane in flight, urging the spirit of the machine to match his own. Yet I learned, courtesy of a crazy old biplane, that to see beauty and to find art, I don't have to fly every moment of my life. I have only to feel the satin metal of a 9/16 inch end wrench, to walk through a quiet hangar, simply to open my eyes to the magnificent nuts and bolts that have been so close to me for so long. What strange, brilliant creations are tools and engines and airplanes and men when the light is turned on. A Gift of Wings, Richard Bach. Excellent reading. So some of you guys are saying hello. That's it. Welcome now. I thought I'd share a little bit of a story about the beginning of my flying. Start at the beginning. And although I'm in my 20th year of flying now, I can think back fondly to the beginning where it all began. I was trained in the Air Force, and in my course of pupil pilots, we began flying in 2000. And my instructor at the time was a very senior man, Ray Edwards. And when you start your flying training, you go through this early excitement, and it's all wonderful, and you can just devour up everything you want to read about. And then it's time you start flying. And about the 7th, 8th lesson in is when you really start to learn to land this aircraft. So this whole lesson is dedicated really to just perfecting landing. And so the profile goes that you will sit on the airplane and take a bit of power and accelerate along the run, line up nicely with the runway, and coming into land and touchdown. Now, landing is quite a complex maneuver. It requires a whole host of skills that all have to come together at the right time in the right place. And you have to slow this aircraft down a little bit. You have to close the power. You have to bring it down closer to the earth. And you also have to cushion it at just the right height so that the wheels start rolling along the runway, hopefully along the center line, and also at the right place on the landing mat on this runway. And I was doing all these things, but about 10 feet too high. So we'd crash down, hitting the earth, and thump myself in the seat, and I could feel the disappointment and shame, and I'd say, sorry, Major, and I'd take power, and the aircraft would accelerate down the runway, trying to keep it straight and carry on, getting up and turning out to try this whole maneuver again, only to repeat it. Well, after the 10th time, I crashed down to the ground. We taxied off at the taxiway and parked the aircraft back in its parking area under the covers. And we shut down and got out. There's a long walk between where we shut down the aircraft and back to the briefing room. And this is usually the place where instructors will start to debrief and start talking about how the flight went. Now, Ray Edwards was a great man, but a man of few words. He turned to me and he said, well, I've seen worse, but not without blood. So that's how it all began for me, and the battling in the beginning. And from there, you've got to learn and build and grow, and aviation is one of those things. It's a hard teacher. Gives you the test first and the lesson afterwards, and you can't learn all the lessons by yourself. So I see a lot of you are signing in now and saying hello, and that's great to see. If you have any questions you want to post in, fire off a question. Some of you have pseudonyms on your name, so I can't tell your name and what your profile is. Maybe you want to know something about getting going and flying. Maybe you want to, you're finishing up your flying training and there's a few things you want to talk about. Maybe there's just a general interest. So fire away a question if you got it, and I'll try and address them. In the meantime, I'll just continue talking about where it all began and build up to what led me here to today. So by the end of that year, I obviously mastered the skills of qualifying as an Air Force pilot, and although it was a rocky beginning, had a few more hiccups along the way. But for those of you who are in the middle of a flying phase right now, maybe you're feeling something similar, and perhaps it's with any new skill and you can relate to this. There was a phase which, having chatted with my friends and fellow pilots or student pilots along the way, it seemed common, but it really felt quite a strong sense of this feeling for me at around 80 to 100 hours of training. Now, bearing in mind the wings training is somewhere in the region of 180 to 200 hours, so this is just before halfway. So there seemed to be a sense for me that this is the level, and this was the scan that you'd go through over and over. Then if you're doing a turn, the scan changes a little bit. You have a point on the horizon now that you started at, but now you're looking for a point where you want to roll out, and you'll start with the bank angle. And so now you've got to include the bank angle in your scan, and the point that you're going to end up flying training required a discipline of scanning. And you had to learn the scans and know that there was 6 or 7 of them. And it was a case of, is this all we're doing? When am I going to get to the point that I'm going to enjoy this flying? And I can remember having conversations with my father about it too, and my roommate Fran, and we would sit there. Is this it? I've done 80 or 100 hours of flying now, and I feel like I haven't really enjoyed it. All I'm doing is point, attitude, altitude, balance, speed, point, attitude. And sometimes you've lost the point on the nose, and it's point on the horizon, attitude, altitude, new point on the horizon, attitude, altitude. So there's definitely a sense. If you're in that phase of training now, then, or any type of training, but particularly if you're in a flying training, it does get better. I can assure you, it gets a lot better, and it's fun, but the discipline that goes with flying particularly, and you have to just drive in that discipline until it gets to a point where these things come second nature. So anyways, I finished up with the flying training. I see some questions coming through, so let me just address them before we end them. Do you remember your first solo? I do remember my first solo. It's quite a special thing in the Air Force, because it's, well, I'm sure in lots of places, but certainly in the South African Air Force, the first solo is quite a ceremony. And it begins with you obviously get ready enough that your instructor is going to give you a solo check on the day. It's almost a briefing for the 2 separate sorties, which are sort of 2 halves of the one big sortie. So I was briefed, and we went out, and I think we did 6 landings or so. He just made sure yesterday was good enough, so today we'll just polish off and make sure everything's good. And then the aircraft parks, the instructor jumps out. Now, bearing in mind this is a military aircraft with an ejection seat, you sit there strapped in, don't move, don't change anything. And he then puts all the safety pins in the seat in the back, and there's a cover that goes over it, makes the aircraft safe at the back, so that it's a single flying, single occupant in this Pilatus Astra. And there we go. And that's it. He said, I'm good enough. So off I go. And now the canopy closes and locked away, and got to go through your checklists. And up until that point, you'd spent all that time with another person in the cockpit with you. And now all of a sudden you're all by yourself. So what does that feel like? Well, it's quiet. I suppose at times you feel a bit foolish that you're saying things out loud. Maybe a bit like this. At least somebody's responding here, though. But you're talking to yourself. And it's the discipline that I spoke earlier with the scanning. So close down the canopy, go to the checklist, get the start running, and that's it. Now you're taxiing out. And that first feeling, it's surreal that you're taxiing out on your own. And, whatever you do now, taxiing this aircraft, it's your baby. And you make sure you do your before takeoff checklist and your lineup checklist. And one of the important points on this Astra, it has an ejection seat. It's got a safety pin between your legs. You reach down, take the pin, make sure you stow it in the canopy so that you can see it. It's painted red and it's quite prominent. And that's it. From there, you go, you take power and you start going. And as I explained earlier, you get yourself into the air and you gingerly, and I think the first thing you do is you scream out loud, wow, I'm really doing this. And I certainly did, shouting and screaming, woohoo, this is me. I'm solo, I'm doing it. And then you quickly shake into a perspective again that, well, there's checks. Remember I told you, scanning. We're on the climb out now. What are the climb out scans? And there's a point now we have to be in the right position to turn downwind. The downwind comes, and you've got to make sure you've lined your aircraft up nicely with the downwind. And spacing's got to be correct. And at some point, you've got to start turning in and go through your base leg checks and your final approach checks and your scans and be ready for it. And well, that first landing, obviously, it was perfect because no one can judge me on it. It was probably a bit harder than I would have liked to have been, but it was just a wonderful feeling. And before we know it, it was all over. It was it. The first solo's done. But here comes the special part now. Now you start taxiing back, and all your friends in that same bright orange convict overall standing on the wall watching you taxi in, and you park under the covers, shut down the aircraft, and you may not touch the ground once you get out of this aircraft. You make the seat safe, open the canopy, climb out, and as you get onto the wing, a whole troop of your friends grab you and put you on the shoulder. There was a ritual at the time, wiping your face with a bit of exhaust dust and taking your boots off and a whole bunch of things that went with it. And they carry you about half a kilometer towards the briefing areas where a few weeks earlier they dug out a hole in the ground, and this was the solo pit of night. So yes, thanks for the question. First solo was amazing. It was a surreal feeling, and I suppose that's where these drills and these scans come in, that it just kicks in. That's it. You know what you need to do, and you do it. Good question. Some more questions. Hello, Marie Antoinette Furges. Oscar, hi, Alex. Have you had a chance to fly the new A350, which has just arrived in the SAA fleet? Yes, I have, Oscar. If you have a look on the LinkedIn, I posted a video of it in the last couple of days. It's a wonderful machine. SAA has 4 of them, and I hope we fly them for many, many years to come. Natalie, hello. I'll be in grade 12 next year. How do I start flying? Well, that's an interesting question. There's lots of flying schools about. So if you are wondering, how do I go about signing up for a flying school? You can have a look at one of my channels there on LinkedIn or Twitter, etc. I have some links to people that run flying schools. I'm not even sure which part of the country in, but there's wonderful schools around in Lanseria and Grand Central and Rand Airport, in 43 Air School and Port Elizabeth and George and Cape Town. So it kind of depends where you are. The first thing I suggest you do is to just start reading as much as you can about it. I'll be sharing more information about flying schools in some of the newsletters that come up too. If you've got an interest in flying, then you just devour as much as you can about flying training. If you want to do it as a career, it's a 200-hour, fairly expensive commitment. If you have an idea of joining the Air Force, which I highly recommend. I spent 10 years in the Air Force, and I'd recommend people do join the Air Force because it's a wonderful place. There's an application process which will start in this year. Perhaps you could even start in the grade 11 year and contact them. Air Command is based in Pretoria, and you can start the selection process through them. You'll end up having the best training in the world. It'll be about 2 and a bit years of training, and after that you'll have a guaranteed job for the next 13 odd years. You'll sign a commitment that you don't leave before that time's up, and it's highly recommended. So have a look at that. Solo landing is always perfect, they say. Well, it was perfect for me anyway. Okay. So one of the other things I would like to just talk about briefly is this idea of discipline and high-performance teams. It's really a theme that I've been exploring and working with for the last while and sharing a lot of information about. And there's lots of great examples out there. But at the moment, obviously we can't meet, we can't do things. So I'm going to share these talks on here. Let me just share a little bit of a thought on high-performance teams. So if you have a look at a team, any team, and a team is a very loose sense of the word here. You could look at an individual superstar, someone like Lewis Hamilton or Rory McIlroy, or one of these people that look like individuals that do a great job. I suppose it's even easier to understand Lewis Hamilton with the Mercedes Formula One team, because there's a whole team behind it. But like someone like Rory McIlroy, a golfer, he also has a team behind him. So these individuals that you see are part of these high-performance teams. What is it that people do, these teams, what do they do well that allows them to continue to deliver this excellence over an extended period of time? And it really comes down to using the principle of incremental gains. It's not a new principle. People have known about this for a long time. But it was really made famous in the sort of mid-2000s where Team Sky was famous. So Dave Brailsford, he was quite public about it. He took over the cycling team, Team Sky Cycling, and the England cycling team as well for the Olympics. And within a short space of time, they'd cleaned up all the Olympic games and the Tour de France's. They'd won 16 gold medals and back-to-back Tour de France victories. And what he did was he asked of each of the units. So he broke down the cycling team into core little units. And these units, he asked of each of them just a 1% improvement. Just if you could each make 1% improvement such that when you all come back together, these little 1% improvements will add up to a significant improvement. So what does that look like? So if you distill that down, how do you go about making these incremental gains, these little bits of improvement such that there's a big improvement? Well, what I've seen is that there's three aspects. The first one is this thorough preparation. High performance teams, they don't go into the event without knowing that they've given it their best in terms of preparation. Know what you need to do, practice the skills that on game day you're ready. Number two is on game day, they deliver their performance with precision. They execute the tasks that require them with precision. And number three, they will go and review. So have a look at the performance of today. How was today's performance? And we're not interested in what the competition is up to. You're just looking at yourself. Was your performance today better than yesterday? What can you look at today that'll improve your performance so that tomorrow is a better day than today? Just incremental gains. So those three steps: thorough preparation, execution with precision, and review, such that you can improve your performance. Every day, try and improve just a little bit so that your whole team improves. So how does that apply to us today? Well, here we are, sitting at home. Most people are working from home. Most schools around the world are either closed or they have some online content, or the students are trying to keep themselves busy with some online or their own material to read. So what I've decided to do is this. Why not upskill yourself? What can I do today that can improve my situation such that tomorrow I'll be better than today? And this is what I'm experimenting with now. So have a look at something small, try and make a little tweak, and just improve the performance. I went through a process of updating the web page, and every day just make a bit of a tweak. So every day there's just a little bit better. Just going to see if there's any more questions that have come in over here. Okay. So there's no new questions there. I wanted to just give you a sense of what it's like as an airline pilot. I said I'd give you about a 30-minute talk. We're getting to about 25 minutes now. So let me end off with a bit of a story on a typical day in the office for an airline pilot. If you're flying international, most of the flying that you'll do is in the region of 10 to 14 hours, and long gym pants for running, even though it's going to be cold outside. Don't forget the gloves. Your hands get cold when you run. Simple things like that. Then what goes with that is I'll check the weather. Now, I'm not just looking at Apple weather. I've got aviation weather, knowing that I'll be flying through to Germany. And I'm specifically looking at weather that will be relevant for when I land in Frankfurt or Munich or London tomorrow morning. The weather forecast is very accurate, and we rely on it, and it gets updated all the time. And if I'm at home somewhere in the region of 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, evening, I will have a look at the weather. I've got a sense of what's coming. It might be very windy, it might be rainy, I might listen to a podcast on the way to work. It's an opportunity for me on a 30-minute commute to just listen to something different and enjoy the conversation with somebody else, or just take my mind off things and kind of get back to sort of zero before we start. And I'll park at work and I'll walk inside and I'll check my bag in. There's a special crew area. Our bags don't go through the airport terminal. And that bag will get then loaded. And then I'll meet up and sign on at the computer saying that I'm at work on time. Normally get to work somewhere in the order of 20 to 30 minutes before I'm required to be at work, such that when the time comes that I need to start, for instance, if I need to be there at 8, I'll get there 20 to 8. Gives me a few minutes to, if I see someone I know, have a few minutes to chat and catch up. And then at 8 o'clock, we're ready and focused. The crew that's all flying together, all looking at the paperwork, and we're ready for this. I've signed on. I've said hello to a few people. I walk to the dispatch area where all the documents are now laid out at the table, and there'll be weather, information about the airports called NOTAMs, notices to airmen. There will be some particular ops instructions. There's information about the technical status of the particular aircraft that we're flying that night. There's the whole flight plan of the detail. I can page through and see at 2:30 in the morning, as we're crossing into the Algeria airspace, there's going to be a very bumpy layer of cloud, and we can So there's a lot of information. I can see where the bumps are. I can see how we're going to climb. I can see what weather there's coming. I can see the fuel use. And the 2 or the 3 or 4 pilots that will get together there, we'll have a discussion, we'll have a look at the weather together, and we'll have a combined talk on what we think this flight will look like. Do we think we'll be adversely affected by any unusual traffic, or are we going to be affected by going around a significantly large thunderstorm such that we have to add an extra 10 minutes of fuel beforehand? Our flight planning will suggest an amount of fuel. Then the 3 of us will look and talk and decide that if that's significant, if that's sufficient, we'll take that. Otherwise, we might, having read into the weather a little bit, add a bit more information, add a bit more fuel just to have some thinking time in the air. Because remember, once you're in an airplane and you get airborne, that's it. There's no filling station on the way to London. So now we'll make that fuel decision, sign off on the paperwork. The office will know now what we are taking of the fuel. We'll leave a bit of documentation with them, take the rest with us. We'll get inside the crew bus, which is a customs exit for us, and then we'll make our way to the airplane. Once at the aircraft, somebody will walk around and make sure the aircraft visually from the outside looks good and everything's all in order. And then the 2 pilots will sit in front. One will be the pilot flying, setting up all the navigation and the flight management systems. And the pilot monitoring will then just cross-check that everything has been loaded correctly. Once that's all done and we've got a final load sheet of who's going to be on board, what sort of cargo we have, are there fresh flowers, do we need to set a temperature so that the flowers don't wilt or freeze, are there animals on board? We do our performance figures, we know what the weather's doing, which airport we're at, which aircraft we're using, and then we'll do a performance calculation. Now we'll discuss on 2 separate devices the performance calculations. Did we get the same answer? If the answers correlate, punch that into the flight management system, and now we can have a final briefing on what this looks like from this parking bay, starting out with the engine order sequence, taxiing out along a particular runway, getting airborne via a standard departure, along a routing, and via an arrival into the destination on the other side, taking into account anything such as weather, terrain, or any unforeseen things, or perhaps a minor technical anomaly that we have to operate this aircraft a little bit differently. Once that little briefing is over, it's time to rock and roll. Not my student, mind you, but at the Saldana Flying Club was 88 doing his private pilot license. So the answer is no, it's not too late to start. It's never too late to start. You might be a little bit behind in your career if you're planning to be an airline pilot, flying internationally, etc. But 34 is still not too late. Give it a go. Thanks for signing in, everybody. I appreciate that everybody has interacted on your questions. More to follow, so stay tuned. I'll give you some more feedback via the LinkedIn or WhatsApp, or sorry, not WhatsApp, LinkedIn or Twitter or the website, the forms newsletters. Anyway, any place that you get social, please join in and stand by for more. Until then, be safe out there. Take care.